That was harder than the shit. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like, you can deal with a terrible situation, but if you think the terrible situation is never gonna end, that is overwhelming. I could handle Iraq 'cause I'm like, "Well, I'm going home." Like, you can do anything for a year, but to think that you're gonna have to do something forever, that was too much for me. So I really wanted to show people that there is a path forward, that you can see healing, see gains, see improvements if you're willing to put in the work, even years later.
Your stories, your service, your community. This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
Welcome to the Tango Alpha Lima podcast. We're here to engage today's veterans through authentic stories, education, and entertainment, and build a virtual community that celebrates continued service and supports the American Legion's mission. We're very, very glad that you're here to be a part of that community, and now it's time for formation.
Hey, Alphas, did you know that there are at least 10 levels of special monthly compensation, which is commonly known as SMC? You know, we like our acronyms. For severely disabling service-connected disabilities that exceed the total rate. They range from L to R2. The current monthly rate of compensation for a single veteran with 100% combined evaluation is $3,831.30. Where the 30 cents comes from, it's the VA. Who knows? For comparison, a single veteran with a total evaluation and SMC at the highest level receives compensation at the rate of $10,964.66 per month. So that you can see that that's a big range. Now that's, again, the maximum SMC at the highest level. So for more information, review 38 USC, that really weird symbol that looks like two S's overlapping, 1114. You can just type in the Google search 38 USC 1114 and it'll still pop up. There are many pathways to SMC eligibility, including vision loss, limb loss, and other debilitating conditions that cause a need for aid and attendance. What is A&A? That's when a claimant's disabilities cause a need for assistance from another person in the performance of daily activities. Then a higher rate may be paid. Daily activities include medication and food management, hygiene needs, dressing, and the ability to leave the home unassisted, among other things. Be sure to check with your American Legion Veteran Service Officer for more details. We'll have a link in the show notes with that code in case you don't want to go type it in your Google search.
Kayla Williams is an author, veteran, and national leader in military and veterans policy who has served in senior roles at the Department of Veteran Affairs, RAND, and the Center for New American Security. An Army veteran, an Arabic linguist with the 101st Airborne Division, she's also the author of Love My Rifle More Than You and Plenty of Time When We Get Home, and a widely recognized advocate for veterans, women veterans, and military families.
After the interview, we'll have a scuttlebutt-filled good stuff. The VA is making a policy change that makes a big difference for female veterans, advice on avoiding scammers, and the legend of Cafe Ground Zero.
And alphas, you really got to watch out for that stuff. These things are getting smart. I mean, we're getting texts left and right trying to get us to click on things, and there's videos floating around of bears stealing cars and stuff. Like, if you think it's bad now, it's going to get worse. Don't click on anything. Don't click on anything that's sent to you. Call the VA. These people want our money so bad. Don't let them have it. And alphas, please stick around. We'll be back with our guest right after the break.
Identity theft usually doesn't start with a headline or a warning. It starts with small disruptions. A credit card gets declined. A bill shows up for something you never bought. An account is locked because someone else tried to access it. By the time you realize what's happening, the cleanup can take weeks or even months. That's why people use Aura. Aura is an all-in-one online safety solution built to help detect and stop identity theft and fraud early. Aura monitors the dark web for leaked emails, passwords, and social security numbers, and sends real-time alerts if your information is exposed. And if identity theft does occur, Aura's white glove fraud resolution team works directly with you to help lock your credit, contact financial institutions, and guide you through the recovery process from start to finish. Aura is offering Tango Alpha Lima podcast listeners with a special offer of up to 75% off. Visit buy.aura.com/tango to get started. That's AURA.com/tango. Certain terms apply. See site for details.
Today's guest is Kayla Williams, Army veteran, former Arabic linguist with the 101st Airborne, and one of the country's leading voices in women veterans and military policy. From serving in Iraq to advising the VA on writing 2 powerful memoirs on war and recovery, Kayla brings both lived experience and national level insight to the conversation. Kayla, welcome to the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. We're excited to have you here. We love your blouse. We actually, so can you give me a little bit about your origin story? Where are you from and what made you decide to serve and why the Army?
Sure.
As a Navy guy, it sounds like I'm throwing shade, but I'm really not.
It's fine. So I grew up in Ohio, and I did everything a little bit backwards. So I went to college and got my first job, then moved on to my second job, did all those things you're supposed to do in your early 20s, bought a house, had a steady boyfriend. And at the same time, I felt a little bit like I was cheating because I got my undergraduate degree in English literature. So they gave me a college degree for reading books, which is my hobby. And I felt like I had never truly challenged myself by making that decision. I also grew up with a single mother parent, and she was an artist. We were on food stamps off and on. I knew that the country had invested in me. I felt like I owed the country something back. And then I got a new boss at my nonprofit job, and we had some different opinions. And okay, I got fired and was trying to figure out what to do next. I wanted to go to graduate school. I had no idea how I was going to pay for it. I was really kind of flailing. Also felt like I was doing what I was supposed to do, not something that I deeply wanted to do, but just following a path everybody else had set for me and digging a rut for myself. And military service was an opportunity to solve a bunch of those problems at once. So like most people, it wasn't one thing that drove me to service. It was how a bunch of things coalesced. I wanted money for grad school. I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to repay the debt that I felt that I owed the country. And when I found out that the military was willing to pay me to learn a foreign language, I thought that was an amazing opportunity and very, very cool. As to why the Army, so I never thought I was hardcore enough to be a Marine. I thought that the Navy uniforms were ugly. And the Air Force recruiter did not return my phone calls. So that was my evidence-based, highly organized way to make a life-altering decision.
The
Right.
pros and cons were weighed very carefully.
Very
I love
carefully.
it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me, Kayla, how did your experience in the Army sort of shape you as an individual and maybe in the future as like who you are today? What were some of those keystones?
So many ways that I wrote a whole book about it. But I think one really, really important thing was teaching me that I was stronger than I realized, right? When I was in college, I worked at Dairy Queen for like 2 days, and everything was sticky, and I didn't like it. And so I quit. But you don't get to do that when you're in Iraq. And I learned that I could, in fact, keep going when things were far worse than sticky, and that I had a depth of strength, reserves within me that I wasn't aware of, that the military pulled out of me by forcing me into situations that I wouldn't have otherwise gone into. And that is something that has stayed with me. I know that if I'm out driving later today, if I see a car accident, I can hop out and provide emergency first aid because I have some of those skills are just muscle memory drilled into me. And I know I won't faint at the sight of blood because I've dealt with it before. And that's really important. I also learned how to prioritize. I learned how to have perspective. As a boss in jobs that I've had as a civilian, when there are moments when everybody else is kind of running around, like chickens with their heads cut off and frantic and hysterical and everything is a top priority. It's like, look, nobody is shooting at us. We'll be okay. Let's figure out what is in fact top priority because not everything can be top priority. So it's given me deep perspective about what's really important. And it also, I will be honest, doing some things that I was not proud of and having to sit with mistakes that I made gave me an opportunity to think really hard about what my values are and what kind of person I want to be and how to pause and try to act with integrity even when it's hard. But I don't know that I would have learned how to do that if I hadn't been in situations where I frankly like fell and made mistakes.
Well, thank you for that, Kayla. And I mean, that's just it's the military side of us, but it's also the real human side, coming out. I'd be interested to hear a little bit about those rich experiences, but kind of distilled down into what was military life like for you. You were in the 101st Airborne, is that correct? And so, what exactly was your time in service like, kind of on the more tactical operations?
Yeah, so I took part of the initial invasion of Iraq back in 2003. This is when, by regulation, women were not supposed to be in ground combat arms jobs or units. But this was also the era, if any of you are old enough to remember, of you go to war with the army you have. And the army we had at the time meant that I didn't have plates in my flak vest because since women weren't in combat, I wouldn't need them. But we also didn't have enough linguists. Certainly during initial invasion, during major combat operations, we didn't have civilian interpreters yet. So when the infantry needed somebody to go out on combat foot patrols with them in Baghdad, I went without plates in my flak vest. And I learned in that moment, first, exactly what it means to be combat support and how important the frontline warfighters are. I also learned how valuable it was for them to have me there, not just as an Arabic speaker, but specifically as a woman, because I could talk to local women in a way that somebody who looks like my husband
Mm,
could not, because, cultural restrictions in a predominantly Muslim country meant that local women could not speak to men that they were not related to. And I frankly look a little less scary than my husband, who's a foot taller than I am. So being able to have genuine conversations with women was incredibly important. And unfortunately, because of the rules in place at the time, I hadn't really trained to do that type of mission. And since then, it's been really heartening to see policies catch up to align with ground reality as commanders saw how much they needed to have women in combat positions. So to get the policies to match up to the ground reality of where we were needed has been really rewarding.
Wow. Okay. So I have like a million questions I want to ask. Starting with it, going without plates in a situation like that is terrifying. Um, Being attached to the Marines, I'm used to not always having everything we
Mm.
needed, but I got involved in a PSYOPs mission one time where I got pulled into an Army mission, and I was impressed by all the stuff that they just had laying around. So knowing that the Army also suffered from that is not a comfort. I guess it's in some ways it's kind of depressing. Um, and
Well,
to know
things
that you
changed,
went
right?
through
Like
that.
we invaded,
Yeah, that
we
was my
in
question.
like
Yeah, like
soft
did you
shell
see it
Humvees
improve?
and right? Like we were
Yeah.
having locals build plates to drop into the doors. Like it was wild to look back on it.
Yeah.
And then they, designed and deployed strikers. Like things adapt.
Yeah, I was '04.
Mm.
So you're probably talking,
We like practically
with
traded places,
I was
right?
about to say, I think that you probably are seeing because I watched some of that transition, and even from the time that I was over there, I did see that stuff get better. And I'm glad that was actually what I was going to ask is, did you see it get better over time? Because what's really stressful, I think, is as veterans who get out, is that knowing that we left things in a way that though we may not have had power over those things, we want it to be better. We don't want anyone to go out without plates, and we don't want
Right.
anyone to be driving around in dangerous places. So I'm glad that there was some feedback of progress because we don't want to
Absolutely.
leave behind that.
Well, and some of the other progress that I've seen is in terms of um, care for mental health. willingness to talk about mental health. I mean, when I got back from Iraq in 2004, I don't think that we were talking about PTSD much at all. I
Mm-mm.
mean, the briefing we got from the chaplain on our way out of Iraq was, I'm not joking, don't beat your wives. And I was like, not helpful. Don't ask, don't tell is still in place. Not
Yeah, we
allowed
must
to
have been
have a
in the
wife.
same meeting, Kayla. My God, I heard the same thing.
Right?
Don't beat your wife.
Like it was
I think my
not,
wife missed that one.
so it was just not the same conversation. And another thing that changed dramatically when I was on active duty, sexual harassment was just absolutely commonplace, but we didn't have the same conversations about how to report it. Didn't have the same conversations about how to report and respond to sexual assault. We have had huge progress on some of these deeply important issues. I'm not saying they have been solved. I'm not saying that things
Mm-mm.
are perfect, but I'm saying that I have seen progress since I was in the military.
The best people to work on policy and to be advocates are obviously those that have the lived experience, that see the problems and the challenges firsthand, that maybe live them in combat when life and death was on the line, and it means something more than just being a lobbyist pushing the next thing along. So, how long were you in for, and when you got out, did you jump right into kind of policy and advocacy, or what was kind of like that growth trajectory for you to be an out front leader, on these issues?
So I was on active duty for 5 years and then, IRR for 3, but that doesn't really count for anything. And when I got out, my first book, Love My Rifle More Than You, was published just a few months after I left active duty. And because I had a book out, I was doing media interviews and did a book tour and was out there talking and realized that I had a voice, and then was really honored to be able to use that voice to advocate about things that were meaningful to me. So, talking about rescinding the combat exclusion policy, talking about repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, so that the, gay and lesbian and bisexual troops that I served alongside could do so as their authentic selves, advocating to improve systems and services for wounded warriors, like the man who became my husband, who I met in Iraq, because we saw how bad things were. And I couldn't stay silent knowing that other people would be coming home to things that were just as bad. And I had to be a part of trying to look for the solution.
Well, I'm glad you brought up um, your writing. And I want to ask you a little bit about, how is it to write something so deeply personal and maybe in some instances traumatic, and to lay bare everything? Do you find that people scrutinize you, or you're scrutinizing yourself? How did that impact you emotionally? And um, did you have any expectations of what you wanted the readers to take away from these experiences that you shared?
So I'll be honest, the first book, I had no idea what I was getting into. I really approached in some ways as if it was like journaling. Like I was like, oh, if I just like vomit all of my feelings out onto the page, then they'll be out of me and I can move on with my life. And I did not at all understand when my publisher said like, oh, you'll be able to do media, right? I did not understand what that meant. And so for me, my book tour was kind of like prolonged exposure therapy, which is an evidence-based form of psychotherapy. But instead of doing it with a trained professional, I was doing it with TV journalists shoving a camera in my face, like, hey, what's it like to watch someone bleed to death? Not what I would recommend. Really encourage folks, if they're going to do that sort of thing, do it with a trained professional who can help you with it. But it did, work in that by talking about the worst experiences of my life over and over did help me get to a point that I could do that without it, causing a lot of emotions to bubble up. What I was really not prepared for also was what it was like to have other veterans come up to me after events and want to talk about their feelings. Because I was freshly out of the military, to have women who served in the Cold War come up to me sobbing, wanting to hug me, saying that they had never felt understood before they heard me talk. I wasn't ready for that. I was still very much like, oh, oh, you're having feelings all over me. Okay. Like not ready for that. So when I was getting ready to write my second book, which is about my husband's injury and our family's journey to recovery, plenty of time when we get home, I was much more mindful of what it could mean for other people. I worked with my publisher to have an appendix included with resources to direct people to, and tried to be really thoughtful about what it would bring up, not just in me, because, I had mental health care by then. So I had resources to help me go through what it was like to churn up all of those feelings, but also what it could be like for other people. And when that book came out and I had people reaching out to me saying, like, you know, um, I didn't know I had PTSD until I read your book and recognized some of what you're describing as symptoms in myself. And I went and got therapy because of it. And that was rewarding. I was like, that's why we were willing to bear things that are, frankly, I don't want to say embarrassing, but it is hard to be candid about what it can look like. And to be that vulnerable and that transparent, knowing that it could encourage other people to go and get help and get care, that's why we were willing to do it.
On my end of things, I took a gander at a sample of your first book, and I'm curious as a fellow author, if you were surprised by when you use your own voice and this sort of sarcasm that is inbred in the military. Some people see that as apathy. And it's very discouraging to realize that there's a lot of love when you say something to a friend in the military, like, don't get shot in the face. It sounds very, very, very callous,
Yeah.
but it literally means, I love you. I'm here for you. Call me if you need me. I'll drop everything I'm doing and I'll come for you no matter what. And I'm curious what you learned after that first book about how to talk to, because I think military members tend to gravitate to that type of humor. But sometimes when people read to get a perspective on the military, they're not going to pick up on that. They have missed the culture completely, and you're reading from the outside in. So I'm curious what you learned going from book 1 to book 2, and is like what you feel like you learned to do right for the next book. And not that anything was wrong with the first book; it's well reviewed. Just in general.
One thing I thought was funny when the first book came out, I had a couple men, write to me criticizing me for cussing. And I've asked men who wrote books about their service, like, if that ever happened to them, and they're like, no. So I thought that was very funny, like the subtle sexism of that. Like,
Yeah.
in terms of that authentic voice. I think also, the first book was so raw because it was written while I was still serving. I had not processed emotionally anything that I went through. The second book, I think if you read it compared to the first one, you'll be like, oh yeah, she went to therapy. Like, you can see that I spent some time processing my emotions and growing and maturing emotionally a bit. I wasn't just like steeped in anger, but I definitely hear what you're saying. I remember very clearly when I first got home telling my parents, like, they asked me to tell them a story, and I told them what I thought was a super funny story about Iraq, and they were like completely appalled and did not think it was funny at all. And I was like, oh, right. We've changed, right? Like, or I've changed
Yeah.
and you haven't changed, and we no longer think the same thing is funny.
I actually on my book, my first book, my foreword said, it was a shout out to my husband, noting that I didn't use the F word once in my entire book. So something I was very proud of. I'm curious, when you turn to Plenty of Time when we get home, you said you focused on your husband's recovery. What happened? What were the circumstances surrounding that? And why was it important to put that experience into words for you?
So he sustained a penetrating traumatic brain injury in Iraq from a roadside bomb in one of the first, like, really organized attacks outside of Mosul. So shrapnel um, entered the back of his skull and traveled forward between his brain and his skull and exited close to his eye. So very severe injury. He had neurosurgery in a tent in Baghdad. and was evacuated back to Landstuhl and then evacuated from there back to Walter Reed. And when he was going through the MEB PEB process, his Peblo said, "Oh, well, it's been 18 months since you were injured, so you're not going to see any more improvement." And that was like a gut punch to me because I'd been banking on, oh, like, yeah, this is hard, but it's like a broken leg. He can still get better. And that was truly devastating to hear. And I didn't know if I could hang on. And that was a lie. Or they didn't know. They've learned so much about brain injuries since, we heard that in 2005. And he has continued to improve. He's improved tremendously because of neuroplasticity and the brain learning to reroute around those injured areas. And as he continued to improve and as he went to therapy and made these incredible gains, I wanted so much for other people to have a sense of hope that might not have a sense of hope, because that feeling of hopelessness at the beginning was tremendously difficult. That was harder than the shit. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like, you can deal with a terrible situation, but if you think the terrible situation is never going to end, that is overwhelming. Like, I could handle rocks. I'm like, well, I'm going home. Like, you can do anything for a year, but to think that you're going to have to do something forever, that was too much for me. So I really wanted to show people that there is a path forward, that you can see healing, see gains, see improvements if you're willing to put in the work, even years later. I think it was 6-7 years before he could read a book cover to cover, but now he's going back to college.
Wow, Kayla. Well, so speaking about, kind of honing in on the books here, talking a little bit about, your own therapeutic process, also relationally, like for your husband, what you learned along the way, being able to, bring those into reality. But what has it kind of done for you professionally? How did those kind of help? And what was kind of the path in parallel to those, to the work that you're doing on the policy front, on the advocacy front, with working with some of those prominent institutions in the
Mm.
world. So that kind of that key focus that you've been advocating for, that you've been driving, and what still needs to change?
So I did accomplish my goal that I set for myself when I joined the Army. I used my GI Bill to go to graduate school, and then I worked for RAND, which is a think tank that does nonpartisan, evidence-based research. Worked there for about 8.5 years, and I started out doing research in international security and defense policy, and then realized that I was spending a lot of time in my personal life doing advocacy on military personnel policy and veterans policy, and realized I wanted to align those things. So I gradually shifted my research portfolio in those directions, and then spent some time working at VA, running the Center for Women Veterans, spent time at another think tank, went back into VA to run the Office of Public and Intergovernmental Affairs. So I'd say the ways that my personal life has influenced it, I think on the research side, it's been important to bring lived experience to the table, helping with survey questions, for example, and say no, you're not phrasing that right. That you wouldn't, in this scenario, people of these two ranks wouldn't be doing this together, trying to bring things to the table that folks who have PhDs but have never had that lived experience may miss. So bringing that perspective of having lived that life to the table, I think has been important. And it's gone the other way too, helping me understand my experiences through the scientific literature, learn that there are terms for things that we're going through, and understanding the prevalence rates of some of our experiences. That's been really helpful. And I mentioned earlier, say, sexual harassment and assault. So doing survey work about the prevalence of those topics and being able to then use that as evidence to push for change, to improve things. So for me, one of the things that's most important is advocating not just for any solution, but for evidence-based solutions because A, I don't want people to get scammed. And B, if we're talking about taxpayer dollars, it's really important that we use taxpayer dollars for things that actually work and not just, snake oil or somebody's, personal pet project. So it's been bi-directional. And then within government, after working at a think tank for over 8 years, it sometimes felt like the good idea fairy. Like, oh, I'm going to come in and I'm going to tell you what I think would work for you to solve these problems and then flutter off into the distance and leave you to deal with it. And it's like, I actually want to go in and be a part of the solution from the inside. I want to try to help drive that change, help make things better from the inside. And that's been deeply meaningful and important work to try to, basically, I guess my life philosophy is like, leave it better than you found it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting, you do talk about the evidence-based, and I agree 100%. But also the problem that we run into sometimes is that there are things that are common sense that people will use evidence and research as a stop hold on things that we know work. An example would be a lot of the alternative therapies and stuff like that we just know from personal anecdotes of thousands of people that things work. I'm not somebody that luckily has to deal with a TBI or anything like that, but I know multiple people who've had their lives completely turned around by some of these alternate therapies. And on the other side of that, also things like service dogs. Dogs legitimately just make people happier and they live longer if you're that type of person. And one of the crazy things is that as a veteran who works with service animals and knows and 1,000 people that have gone through the program, there are still people that will not allow us to say certain things because there hasn't been research done. And I'm not trying to say dogs will save lives or anything big like that. It's literally like dogs lower anxiety rates. And it's funny that there's so many people that seem like they want their solution to work. There's so many people pushing certain types of medications and things like that. And that's scary for me as somebody who, when I was in the hospital for a year and a half, I don't remember a lot of that because of all the stuff they had me on. My life didn't really start until I got off of everything. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like you got something to follow up that. I mean, I was
No,
more just
I
complaining
absolutely
there than
agree.
had a
I think that
question. So
we need the data, right? And one of the things that is frustrating is that there aren't many medications. I don't know if there are any medications that are strongly evidence-based for PTSD, right? And a number of medications that are still being prescribed to people with PTSD that are specifically contraindicated, like benzos. And so trying to get to a point where we can say like, okay, let's develop a strong enough evidence base that we can decide that we do want to spend tax dollars on this, and also put in some safeguards and figure out how to write good policy, because good policy is really hard, right? Like, and that's one of the most challenging things, is figuring out exactly how to get it right. Like, I have 2 dogs. I love my dogs. In some ways, they relieve a lot of my stress. There are other times when they are adding to my stress. They are not trained service dogs. I will say that very clearly. But, if you do have a situation where, for example, uh, a government provided dog were to like bite a child, is the government on the hook to pay for the injuries? There are a lot of policy things that need to be worked out. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be done. I'm just saying it needs to be done thoughtfully and carefully and right.
Mm.
And that's where I think, unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to do that work. They want to just say like, well, I mean, this works really well with my friends, so let's make it available for everybody, without doing that hard work of thinking through, okay, second order effects, third order effects, and really nail down exactly what needs to be covered in the policy, and doing it thoughtfully.
Speaking of policies, the American Legion does a lot in that realm and putting things forward and trying to advocate for veterans and disabled veterans alike. And I was going to ask you, Kayla, what do you think the American Legion could be doing differently or improving upon, or maybe keeping status quo on to better serve post 9/11 veterans like us?
I would love to see the Legion continue to push forward on advocating forcefully on behalf of all veterans as we become much more diverse as a population.
Awesome. The other thing is, what could you tell Legion posts who want to become more welcoming to women who served?
Remember that we served.
That's fair.
There have been times when I've kind of tested out various posts from different organizations by just walking up to the bar and asking for an application. And there have been times when the people have said, like, and it's usually a bartender, but I remember very clearly a time when a bartender looked at somebody who was sitting at the bar, was like, well, do I give her an auxiliary application? And the person sitting there was like, no, if she's a veteran, you give her the regular application. And so just really making sure that folks understand that we're out there, that we're serving, and to always, approach us with that same level of respect that you would give to anybody else who served.
We've, I think, as a legion, but also as individuals, there's been times when Stacy and I have been out getting lunch somewhere, and people have just pegged her as my wife, just because the veteran wife, which is, it's very frustrating for me. So I can only imagine what it does for Stacy. So but as a legion, we've worked very hard to make sure that when people say things like the men's side or the women's side of the Legion, or the men's and the auxiliaries, that that terminology is dying, and I'm
Right.
happy to say that that's a good thing.
And culture change takes time, and I respect
It
that.
does,
And
yeah.
the important thing is to continue to push towards that change consistently. And frankly, I'm glad to hear you say that, Joe, because there are times when you will probably be in a room where it's just other men, and
Hmm.
you have an opportunity to step up and say something that I won't have in those moments. And so
Yeah.
it's those are those moments when we need men to say to other men, hey, no, women have served, women are in combat, women are in the infantry today, women have successfully completed ranger school, the standards
Yeah.
have not changed. Men need to step up and say these things to other men in moments where women aren't there.
Well, you'll be happy to know that I am confrontational. I grew up with a bunch of sisters in a beauty shop, so you don't have to worry about me. I'll always have your back. My final question for you is actually, are there any projects, books, research, policy initiatives, or anything that are coming up that you're excited about?
I think
Or are
that's a
you
great
working on
question.
something maybe?
I'm hoping to buckle down and be disciplined enough to try my hand at fiction. So that on a personal level. And then in the advocacy space, I mean, right now, I think trying to hold the line,
Yeah.
because I'm definitely seeing hints that there are efforts underway to roll back the gains that women have made in the military,
Mhm.
and the gains that our LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters have made in the military, and wanting to hold the line and say the most important thing is that people be able to get into jobs and units based on merit, and they should not be excluded from jobs or units based on things like their gender, and we shouldn't be trying to push people out because of their race if they need a shaving profile. To me, that seems ridiculous. We have had enough recruiting problems recently that we need to be doing everything we can to open the door to every qualified person, and not put in place artificial barriers.
Two things there. One, completely agree on that front. And number two, when when you get into fantasy, just so you know, as a fantasy author, it's way more fun, and you don't have to source any of your information.
Right? I'm
So
excited
that
about
right
that
there
too.
alone will make it fun.
That's fair.
I've read
Oh,
some really fun things on that note about how there are like names that you never see in fantasy books because people think that they wouldn't sound, you know, right, but that are actually very evident, like you can find in the
Yeah.
history, and just what we think sounds like wrong because it seems too modern. And I think that's amazing. Like, wouldn't it be fun to do like a dragon book where the main character's name is like Jessica?
Yeah.
That's
Sam
actually
or
great.
John. Yes. Perfect. Okay.
Uh,
I know that our super producer Holly is creating a book list for our alphas. Do you have a favorite book that you go to back and read over and over again?
I'm a huge nerd. So I actually reread Dune by Frank
Okay.
Herbert over
All
and
Oh,
right.
over.
really?
Um,
There you go. Alpha's guest recommendation would be Dune.
I'm enough of a like. We actually named our son Duncan. That's
That's a good name.
how big of a nerd I am.
That's
So
pretty
yeah, I
cool.
read that over and over. Um, what else do I read repeatedly? I want to like look over my shoulder.
You have some pretty good bookshelves
Oh, I do. Yeah.
for those
Um,
of you who aren't watching the YouTube version that are just streaming the audio. She's standing in front of a bookshelf that's littered with books. So
littered with
imagine.
books. Um, I'll say I really love the author Octavia Butler. She
Okay.
does tremendous, tremendous work. And of a slightly more recent author, still writing today, as opposed to the other two authors I mentioned who are both already dead. N.K. Jemisin does phenomenal, phenomenal sci-fi, just really perspective altering in some amazing ways. And lately, I've been reading a lot of Adrian Tchaikovsky, also sci-fi and fantasy, because again, big nerd. I feel like you probably actually wanted me to make maybe military book suggestions.
Nope, any
Um,
books. I think any books are good.
um, and I'm happy to send along a whole list of suggestions of books by women veteran authors as well. I've been collecting kind of a long list, but one that I really, really enjoy is by Ryan Lee Dosty. She is a great author, and I can't wait to read her fiction after having read her memoir.
Well, I'm gonna put that on my, very, very extensive TBR, so I'll get on that. Thanks for those recommendations, Kayla. We
Absolutely.
really appreciate the time that you've spent with us today. Before we sign off, is there anything that you wanted to share that we didn't necessarily cover in our discussion?
I think I was able to get in most of my things that I had in the back of my mind of like, I want to make sure that I mention this. The reading that the Secretary Hegseth has demanded a review of women in combat positions recently has been really disheartening. And so, just it's very much top of mind that since my experience on the ground in Iraq, it was a decade until they formally lifted the ban on women in combat. And then it's been another 13 years of that being slowly and carefully implemented and studied throughout. So to think that that's being questioned now is just so disheartening. The question of can women hack it in combat, like that has been asked and answered so thoroughly. And I'm just, I'm feeling, I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling tired of having to relitigate things that we've really covered quite thoroughly already.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, blazing the path for the women, that came behind you, and hopefully they'll be, brave enough, bold enough, strong enough to stand their ground so we don't move back in time, that we keep moving forward. And, the legacies that we women service members can pass that baton on, and they carry that legacy forward. That's how it should be, and how we need to keep it going. So, Kayla, I really, really appreciate you, and, I'm a big fan.
Thank you. I'm a big fan of your work as well. And thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me to be able to share my story and talk with the three of you and to your audience.
Well, thanks for being here. We
Thanks,
appreciate you.
Kayla. It's been great.
Alphas, you can go to KaylaMarineWilliams.blog to learn more about Kayla's work and maybe stay in touch with that fiction work she's working on. And Kayla, thank you so much for visiting us today. Alphas, stick around for some scuttlebutt after the break.
In precision marksmanship, you compete against one of your most formidable opponents, yourself.
It's different than other sports, but it's also a lot of discipline.
I definitely love the intensity and the challenge.
I think that has also helped me come out of my shell because we go to so many different places, meet so many new people.
You gotta make sure that you're always there in the game at all times. It's nice to have like that sort of head-to-head competition.
So just get involved. We'll teach you how.
All right, Alphas, we hope you had a great break. I mean, like, really good. And now it's time for some scuttlebutt.
Hey, Lady Alphas, the VA is making a policy change just for us. In a big step for women's health care in the VA system, the Department of Veterans Affairs now allows women veterans to schedule gynecology appointments without needing a referral from a primary care provider. I know this seems really simple, but y'all, this is a big deal. That means enrolled women can go directly to the VA gynecology specialist whenever they choose to. Fun fact. We all need that. Streamlining access and removing a major barrier that many faced in the past. This helps us expedite our own needs and take care of ourselves. This new process started back in December of 2025 and is expected to benefit more than 1 million women veterans enrolled in VA healthcare. VA Secretary Doug Collins summed it up this way. This is what it looks like when VA is focused on putting veterans first. Emphasizing customer service and convenience, the VA aims to build a system that works better for those it serves, especially women who've waited too long for easier access to essential care.
All right, Alphas, the buck stops here. Scammers, no veterans, often have access to VA benefits or military pensions. So they target us with fake investment schemes, phony grant offers, and identity theft attempts, or, like Joe said, with bears stealing cars. Here's
It's
what
real.
to watch out for.
It's so real.
Calls or emails claiming to be from the VA or Social Security, asking for your personal info. Legitimate agencies never ask for passwords or bank info over the phone. Impersonators offering veteran grants or loan forgiveness programs. If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. Tips to stay safe out there. Verify offers through the official VA website or trusted veteran service organizations before responding, and report any suspicious activity to the VA Office of the Inspector General or the Federal Trade Commission. When in doubt, you can check with the American Legion to confirm whether they're legitimate or not too.
So I got something a little strange but service connected, and so of course we're talking about the Pentagon, not Area 51. But fun fact: because the Pentagon is so big, about twice the office space of the Empire State Building, it operates almost like a small city, including having its own zip code to handle mail efficiency. A very popular Cold War story claims that the Soviet satellites once thought a tiny building in the Pentagon's courtyard was a secret command center because groups of officers gathered around it at lunch each day. The legend goes that the USSR, which for some reason their intel was so good, I don't know why they're not around anymore, kept nuclear missiles aimed at the hot dog stand nicknamed Cafe Ground Zero. In reality, it was just a snack stand, and while the Pentagon was indeed a potential target during the Cold War, the idea that nukes were specifically aimed at the stand is folklore rather than documented fact. But could you imagine, though, you're like, I'm going to run a hot dog stand for all these hungry people because, there's nice food in there, but a hot
I
dog,
wonder
everybody
what the
wants a hot
conversation
dog.
was like in the USSR, like a war room. Why are they all eating hot dogs? They're standing around these guys in the cold eating hot dogs? What a
Yeah,
bunch of wieners.
I think that sometimes you see yourselves in other people, and to them, they're like, if we were going to send secret messages, it would be in meat. Like that's clearly what they're doing as well. But during and after its construction, quirky stories circulated about hidden rooms, secret apartments, and even ghosts inside the Pentagon wall, such as the tale of an officer who supposedly had a hidden apartment built in the structure where he would disappear for hours. It was probably the bathroom. But these anecdotes become part of the building's internal lore and are more humorous myth than verified history.
By the way, Joe, did you know that there actually was an apartment built in the Pentagon when it was first built? And that was for wartime when people were working really long hours, they could go in and take a nap, kind of like
I didn't
the
know that.
firehouse or at hospitals. So I wonder if there was a little bit of fact behind that fiction.
Well, no. There's a difference, Stacey Pearsall, between fact and documented fact. And that's a clarification I want to make right now. Although it's funny because none of this is documented fact. I think we're crazy if we don't think there's not a hidden room in the Pentagon somewhere. I mean, there's
what?
something. There's got to be something. If you guys have got a secret clearance, hop on Reddit, let us know.
Yes, let's go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, let's go down the Reddit rabbit hole, man. If you've got a secret, super secret clearance, come on. We're waiting on you. Jump on Reddit. Tell us what's up. Tell us about the hidden rooms.
Give us your hot dog codes.
Yes, give us your hot dog codes to help employees. And they got the meats. Employees cover the long distance inside. The Pentagon provides motorized scooters for internal travel, helpful when you navigate miles of corridors every day. Traffic's crazy in here.
Beep, beep. Hey, what was that? Oh, yeah. Remember the Disney flick, Wall-E?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
where he's like,
Pentagon is like, I guess, not hover chairs, but everyone's got the rascals, like old people.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Beautiful. But we'll have a links for that in the show notes, along with blueprints of the Pentagon.
Yes, and all the secret codes to the hot dogs.
And all the secret codes. And we'll update you when Redditors jump on and share their knowledge about the Pentagon.
Sounds good.
I could go for a nice chili dog now.
Yes.
I know. I'm hungry now.
Okay,
A
wait.
little
Serious
coleslaw on it.
question. So you're saying you like yours with chili. I'm more of like a relish, mustard, and ketchup gal. Joe, how do you like your wiener?
I actually do just like it with mustard, to be honest.
Okay.
I like ketchup, and I'll tell you why I like ketchup, because
Oh my
it's
gosh,
usually
you're
cold.
one of those.
I like the mix of temperatures.
Cold ketchup on a hot dog.
Yeah, come on.
Oh,
Okay, what?
that's so scandalous. Oh my gosh.
How dare you, Joe? That's not very hang loose at all.
Uh-huh.
I like mine. I like mine just dry. Just give me the meat and the dry bun. Make sure it's stale and got a little mold. Like I got the
Can
hot
I get
dog,
an
but I
extra
forgot the
bun with my hot dog?
I remember one funny story before we split, guys. My mom would always forget to get hot dog buns. She would pick up the hot dogs, but then she would be like, "Just use a piece of bread." What is it about a piece
That
of
makes
bread?
me so
not
angry
eating-
when somebody tells me to use a
does not,
non-hot dog
no.
bun bread
That's
for a
like
hot
putting
dog.
water on cereal. It's not milk.
It's
It is not a
It's
hot
not
dog
the
bun.
same.
Okay,
So wait,
Albert.
we all live in the South, so no coleslaw on your dog on your
We
hot
want to
dogs?
know what you like on your hot dogs. Let us know. You can also subscribe to our newsletter and send us mail recommendations and guest recommendations when you send in your hot dog recommendations as well. Send them to legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. Thanks for listening. Hey, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your favorite shows, especially Tango Alpha Lima. We'll see you next time.